Clarence Thomas openly mocked Jasmine Crockett's legal skills, cut her off mid-sentence, and tried to embarrass her in front of the entire hearing room. But only after 5 minutes her brutal, perfectly timed counterattack exposed his arrogance, froze him in his seat. It triggered a viral backlash, shattered his authority in the room, and left his reputation under nationwide scrutiny. Inside the hearing chamber in Washington fell into a heavy, unnatural silence. Tension hanging in the air like a storm about to break, because everyone there knew this wasn't a routine session, it was the moment a public clash was about to erupt. Clarence Thomas let out that chuckle, low, slow, and deliberate. He looked straight at Jasmine Crockett as if she was a student who just tried to fake her way through a final exam. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, stretching the title like it was almost a joke. "You call yourself a lawyer, and yet I have to ask, do you actually understand the foundations of constitutional law?" The words were wrapped in politeness, but the tone was a slap, the kind of insult that sounds calm but lands hard. For a split second nobody moved. Crockett didn't do that nervous little laugh people do when they're trying to stay likable. She just held his gaze, calm still long enough that it stopped feeling normal and started feeling dangerous. The moment Jasmine Crockett tried to speak, Clarence Thomas cut across her voice like a blade sliding over glass. "This isn't a campaign rally," he said sharply. "We're here to discuss law, not perform." The word perform hung in the air like an insult wrapped in professionalism. Crockett didn't snap back. She inhaled once and continued anyway, but he interrupted again, louder this time, reframing her words before she could finish. "So, what you're really saying," he pressed, "is that you don't trust the court. It was a trap." Twist her argument, shrink it, make her look reckless. A few people in the gallery shifted in their seats. Someone whispered, "Wow," under their breath. The rhythm of the room started to feel like a shove and pull, power trying to drown out resistance. Crockett finally lifted her eyes fully to him. "No, Justice Thomas," she said, steady but cutting. "What I'm saying is that accountability is not disrespect." He smirked and leaned forward. "You're new here," he replied, voice calm but dripping with condescension. "Maybe you should listen more and speak less." That line landed harder than the interruptions. It wasn't about law anymore, it was about hierarchy. Crockett's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second, then relaxed, respectfully. She fired back, "I didn't run for office to sit quietly while power avoids questions." The room stirred, pens stopped moving, even the chair shifted posture, sensing the temperature rising. Thomas opened his mouth to cut her off again, and that's when Crockett changed the pace. Instead of raising her voice, she slowed it down. "Let me finish," she said firmly, each word spaced out on purpose. "Let the public hear the full sentence before you decide what it means." The chair cleared their throat and glanced at the clock. "We do need to stay within time," they said carefully. Crockett nodded once. Thomas gave a short laugh, barely hiding it. "Funny how time only seems urgent when it's not." "My turn," Crockett shot back, her tone sharp but controlled. A few heads snapped up, the power balance wobbled. For the first time, Thomas hesitated before speaking again. Then Crockett delivered the line that changed the room. She turned slightly toward the microphone and said calmly, "I'd like the record to reflect that I was interrupted. Not loud, not dramatic, just precise." The stenographer's fingers immediately picked up speed. A low ripple ran through the chamber. That wasn't a political clapback, that was courtroom language, that was documentation. Thomas straightened in his chair. "This is unnecessary," he said, irritation creeping into his voice. Crockett didn't look at him. "So is silencing," she replied, "but here we are." The silence that followed wasn't awkward anymore, it was heavy. Clarence Thomas didn't back off after being put on the record. He leaned in again, voice colder now, sharper. He implied that what Crockett was doing wasn't legal oversight but political theater dressed up as justice. He suggested she was confusing activism with law, emotion with structure, noise with substance. The words weren't shouted, but they were designed to sting. Crockett didn't react right away. She let the accusation hang in the air, giving it time to sink into the room. Then she tilted her head slightly and spoke with careful precision. So your position is this, she said slowly, that when elected officials question judicial behavior, it's activism, but when judges dismiss those questions, it's authority. The room tightened. That wasn't a debate. Question, that was a pin pushed straight into the heart of his argument. Thomas waved it off with a small shake of his head, dismissive, almost bored. He brushed aside the implication and doubled down, repeating that the court doesn't answer to political pressure. Crockett didn't interrupt this time. She let him keep going. She let him stack his words higher and higher, letting his confidence turn into overreach. Her eyes never left him, not aggressive, not emotional, observant, calculating. So accountability equals pressure, she continued calmly, and transparency equals interference. A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. Someone near the back exhaled loudly without realizing it. Crockett nodded once like she was filing the statement away. That's helpful, she added quietly. It tells the public exactly where you draw the line, and suddenly the room realized she wasn't arguing anymore. She was collecting. Her binder sat untouched in front of her. Thick, heavy, closed, it became impossible to ignore. Crockett rested her hand on it, not opening it, just letting it exist in the frame. The pause stretched longer than usual. She didn't rush to flip pages. She didn't rush to speak. She let the silence build pressure. I don't need to raise my voice, she said evenly. Your words are doing enough work on their own. Thomas shifted again, clearly irritated now. You're implying motives, he said. Crockett didn't blink. No, she replied, I'm documenting patterns. That line landed hard because patterns don't disappear. Patterns follow you. Then something subtle happened in the background. A committee staffer, quiet, professional, almost invisible, stepped forward and placed a thin folder on the staff table near the chair. No announcement, no explanation, just paper sliding against wood. The sound was soft, but on live stream it was loud enough to catch attention. Viewers at home noticed it instantly. Screens filled with comments asking, what's that folder? Why did they just bring that up? Inside the chamber, Crockett saw it too. She didn't turn toward it. She didn't acknowledge it yet. Instead, she let it sit there like a loaded question nobody had asked out loud. She leaned back slightly in her chair, finally breaking eye contact for a moment, then returned her gaze to Thomas. Before we go any further, she said calmly, I want to be very clear about what you just told the American public. Her tone wasn't loud, it was steady. You said oversight is interference, you said questioning is pressure, and you said the court should operate without answering uncomfortable questions. She paused again, letting the weight of his own words press down on the room. That's not activism, she added, that's accountability. It's about to get very specific. Then Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She leaned forward, slow and deliberate, like a litigator stepping into the final round of cross-examination, and the room instantly felt smaller. You laughed at my credentials, she said, voice calm but sharp, so let's get something straight right now. She tapped the table once, not hard, just enough to mark the moment. I didn't learn constitutional law from speeches. I learned it standing in front of judges defending people who couldn't afford to lose. Her eyes didn't blink. While you sit behind a lifetime appointment, I've stood in rooms where one wrong ruling meant someone lost their home, their freedom, or their voice. The temperature in the chamber rose. So don't reduce my work to activism, she added, cutting deeper. That's what people say when they don't want to admit the law is being used to protect the powerful instead of the public. A ripple moved through the audience, low and electric, like a current finally finding water. She didn't stop there, and here's the part you don't get to twist. Crockett continued, her tone tightening. The Constitution is not your personal armor. It is not a shield for the powerful to mock the powerless, to dodge scrutiny, or to hide behind tradition. When accountability knocks, she leaned even closer. You talk about respect for the bench, but respect isn't demanded. It's earned. A sharp inhale cut through the silence. Thomas shifted in his chair, adjusting his robe, jaw tightening as if he was biting back a response. Crockett noticed and pressed harder. If my legal skills make you uncomfortable, she said coldly, it's because they don't flatter authority. They expose it. The room froze. His smirk was gone now, replaced with a stiff, controlled expression that couldn't hide the crack underneath. Crockett straightened slightly, letting the weight of her words settle before delivering the final blow. "You tried to make me smaller," she said, steady and unshaking. "Instead, you just reminded everyone watching what happens when arrogance runs into preparation." She paused long enough for every camera and every phone to lock onto the silence. "So no, Justice Thomas," she finished, voice firm and unforgiving, "I don't misunderstand the Constitution. I understand it well enough to know when it's being disrespected." No shouting followed, no applause, just a heavy charged quiet. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice when she launched. The next move, she lowered it. "Since we're talking about constitutional foundations," she said calmly, "let's talk about impartiality foundations." The room stiffened. That sentence landed differently. It wasn't personal, it wasn't emotional, it was procedural, and that made it dangerous. Crockett opened her binder for the first time, not dramatically, just enough to show paper edges stacked clean and ready. "I'm moving to enter a summarized timeline into the record," she continued, covering disclosure questions, ethics concerns raised publicly, and appearance standards tied to judicial neutrality. She paused and let that settle. "Not accusations," she clarified, "concerns already circulating that this body has a duty to review." That distinction mattered. It wasn't an attack, it was a trigger for oversight. Thomas reacted immediately. "This is irrelevant," he snapped, pure theatrics. His voice was sharper now, less controlled. "You're turning a legal discussion into a spectacle." Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him at first. She looked forward and said evenly, "Relevance is not comfort, relevance is conflict of interest." The words hit hard. "If public trust depends on impartiality," she added, "then transparency is not optional, it's foundational." A murmur rolled through the chamber. Thomas shook his head and leaned forward. "You're implying misconduct without proof," he pushed. Crockett met his eyes. "I'm documenting concern so the process can decide," she replied. "That's how oversight works." The difference between accusation and procedure was now the center of the room. The chair raised a hand slightly. "Staff counsel," they said carefully. A committee staffer stood and spoke briefly, voice neutral and precise. "A document packet exists for committee review related to ethics disclosures and public standards." They confirmed, "It has not been ruled on, it has been logged." That was it. No conclusions, no judgments, just confirmation that the process was real. The effect was immediate. People shifted in their seats. Reporters started typing again. Faster this time. Thomas tightened his grip on the armrest, jaw set, eyes narrowed. This was no longer about mocking a freshman congresswoman. This was about legitimacy, recordkeeping, and public accountability. Then Crockett closed her binder, not gently, not aggressively. Just once, sharp and clean. The sound cut through the chamber like a gavel she didn't need permission to use. Head snapped up, the room went still. Crockett looked forward and said quietly, "The record is open now." The chair cleared their throat and warned both sides to maintain decorum, but the warning came too late to stop what had already happened. Clarence Thomas finally spoke again, but the tone had changed. It was colder now, clipped, controlled, in that stiff way people talk when they're trying to sound steady while losing ground. He didn't argue character anymore, he argued procedure. He said the committee was overstepping, that the process was being stretched, that this line of discussion was misguided, but it didn't land. Everyone could feel it. He wasn't pushing back on Crockett herself anymore, he was trying to push back on the record, and that's a much harder fight to win because paperwork doesn't flinch and transcripts don't forget. Crockett didn't smile, she didn't nod in victory, she didn't even look satisfied. She narrowed the frame and tightened it around one simple idea. "This isn't about personalities," she said calmly. "It's about dignity, it's about fairness, it's about whether the same standards apply to everyone or only to people without power." Her voice was steady, not emotional, not dramatic. "Equal accountability isn't disrespect, it's democracy." The room leaned into that silence. You could almost hear the weight of it pressing against the walls. Even people who disagreed with her politics couldn't ignore the structure of what she was saying. Small reactions started to ripple. The stenographer glanced up for half a second before returning to the Keys, two reporters locked eyes and exchanged a look that said everything without words. This was the clip. One aide slowly lowered their phone. Realizing they didn't need to move anymore, the moment was already captured. Thomas shifted again. Straightening his back, pulling his shoulders tight like armor that suddenly felt too heavy, he tried to regain authority with a short, firm sentence. "We're done here," he said, voice sharp. Attempting to close the door before more damage could be done, Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue the command, she simply looked forward and answered with precision. "No," she said. Calm and unshaking, "The record is done here and it will outlive both of us." The words dropped into the room and stayed. There no echo, no applause, just silence. The moment the hearing recessed, the clip was already everywhere. The exact second Clarence Thomas' smirk faded. The freeze, the jaw tightened, the shift in his chair became the thumbnail across social feeds. Screens filled with the same paused frame, cropped tight. Captioned with variations of "This is the moment it changed." The algorithm did the rest. Views jumped by the thousands. Every minute, people didn't even need context anymore. That single expression told the story. Power challenged. Control slipping. By the time Crockett stepped away from the table, her words were already traveling faster than the elevators in the building. The reaction split into three clear waves. Law students and professors flooded timelines with breakdowns, calling it rhetoric under pressure, praising how she stayed calm while tightening the argument instead of swinging emotionally. Political insiders whispered in group chats and hallway texts, repeating the same line over and over: "Do not underestimate her." And regular viewers, people who don't care about procedure or legal language, reacted in the simplest way: "She spoke for everyone who's ever been talked down to in a serious room." That sentence kept showing up again and again, reshared by teachers, parents, service workers, and people who had never watched a hearing before in their lives. Outside the chamber, a reporter caught up to Crockett and asked if she expected the moment to explode online. She didn't slow down, she didn't smile for the camera, she just said quietly, "I didn't come here to go viral, I came here to make the record truthful." Then she kept walking, no victory pose, no celebration, just steady steps down the hallway, phone buzzing in her pocket, staff struggling to keep up. Behind her, the room she left was louder than when she entered. Reporters talking at once, aides whispering, producers already planning segments around what just happened. That final image stuck with people. Crockett walking out calm and controlled while the space she left behind stayed charged and unsettled. Clarence Thomas still sat where he always had, but the atmosphere around him had changed. The laughter was gone. The comfort was gone. What remained was documentation, replay buttons, and a public that had just watched authority get checked without shouting. It wasn't chaos, it was consequence. And that's why the moment didn't fade overnight. It replayed because it felt rare, clean, sharp, unavoidable. Because in a room built to protect power, someone stood up without raising their voice and made the record speak louder than rank. Power laughed first, the record spoke last. If this moment hit you the way it hit the room, don't let it stop here. Subscribe now for more real power clashes, courtroom-level showdowns, and stories where truth doesn't stay quiet. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next confrontation, because the record is still being written and you deserve to see every chapter.